Welcome to the Creator's Adventure, where we interview creators from around the world hearing their stories about growing a business. Today I'm talking with an entrepreneur who grew an 8-figure business by giving away hundreds of millions of dollars. It sounds crazy, but stay tuned and we'll get into his experience in business and selling training products. Hey everyone, I'm Brian McAnulty. I'm the founder of Heights Platform. Let's get into the show. Hey everyone, we're here today with Spencer Vann, the co-founder and CEO of SurplusFund.com. By the time Spencer was 24 years old, he had already built an 8-figure company and helped give away hundreds of millions to people across America who needed it. Spencer, welcome to the show.
Yeah, it's a pleasure and honor to be here, and I'm very excited. Very excited.
Awesome. Well, my first question for you, this is something that I've started to ask guests when they come on. What would you say is the biggest thing that you did or that you're doing that has helped you achieve the freedom to do the things that you enjoy?
Well, I think that's going to sound really kind of abstract, but I think just committing. There's this, one of my favorite quotes is that perseverance counts far more than potential. And I think a lot of times when you're growing up as a kid, I know for me, it was like, I go to school and then there's like this advanced program that I wasn't in, and it's like all the smart kids, like, oh, their potential's higher. Or like, I'm not like this amazing athlete that I was just born with like LeBron James genetics. And so like, okay, well, his potential is way higher, right? But for me, it's really just been a battle of perseverance and just pushing through always. And I think that is single-handedly the one action or decision that I've mentally made that has probably made the biggest impact.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a great answer. I like when it's a little bit more abstract like that because I think it's gives people something to think about. So
I think so too, because on top of that too, it's like when you, if I were to give you like this tactical thing, like, oh, webinars made the biggest difference. Well, first of all, webinars don't make sense for everyone to do. Like everybody can commit to persevering.
Yep.
Right? Everyone can commit to figuring things out, but
Exactly.
Everybody can commit to doing a particular tactical thing. So
Cool. So when we were doing some research on you, we kind of figured that like you were always a very entrepreneurial type of person, even at an early age. Can you share some examples of how your passion for entrepreneurship has kind of evolved throughout the years?
yeah, that's an interesting question. I think originally it came from a place of scarcity. So, I grew up in an interesting family situation. My younger brother's autistic, and we lived in a nice neighborhood, but a lot of the money that I guess would have been excess money went to trying to treat him and take care of him. And so we really didn't have a lot of money growing up. I think originally it was like this, I wanted to make a lot of money from a place of scarcity of like, oh man, like I need to take care of people, da 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 da. And I think it's slowly evolved to just genuinely wanting to serve and help people. And I think every entrepreneur says that. In fact, it's funny, I read a post from Alex Becker like a few months ago where he was talking about like, everybody says that they want to help people, but the reality is like, very few people are like Mother Teresa, where it's like they're just helping people out of the kindness of their heart. And so there's still an element of me that, of course, I want to build a big company and accumulate resources and do those things. But I also want to do that in a way where it genuinely actually makes a difference in society. I don't want to be remembered as someone that is, I don't know, just like this greedy guy that just wants a bunch of money and like, has a big house somewhere. Like that's not really me. And honestly, I don't think that that's a lot of people. I think that a lot of people think that they want to make a lot of money and they want to be that guy or that girl coming from that place of scarcity. But I think once you start to accumulate a reasonable amount of resources, you start to realize like, if you have $5 million and you live a reasonable life, I live in a 1-bedroom apartment, it costs like $3 grand a month. I mean, it's not very much, right? So if I go from 5 million in my bank account to 6 million in my bank account, what difference does that make, right? Like, okay, I added another 100 years of savings. Like, it doesn't really make a difference. But, being able to help someone start a surplus fund business, for example, with one of my companies, right? And grow that business to where they go from making $2K a month working at, an Amazon warehouse to $8K a month working from home, and they can spend more time with their kids, that makes a huge difference in their life, and that brings me a lot of fulfillment. So kind of a long roundabout answer, but I think that that's probably been the biggest change and biggest evolution for me.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great answer. Can you explain a little bit to our audience what exactly a surplus fund is? I'm not even really familiar with that too much myself.
Yeah, well, that I think it highlights one of the beautiful elements of it. It's not very many people know what a surplus fund is. A surplus fund is just lost money that is owed to someone and is being held by a third party. Now, that's again a really roundabout, abstract way of explaining it, but essentially it works like this: when someone owes someone else money, either a person or a company, right? So it could be two companies, two people, a company and a person, whatever the case is. And there's a legal binding agreement, which in many transactions there are. In fact, one of the main transactions where there are surplus funds exist is real estate foreclosure auctions, which I'll get to in a second. But when somebody owes someone else money and they can't find that person or they can't send that money to them or there's some issue with actually getting the money over to them, they legally are bound to paying them the money. They can't not pay them the money unless they want to break the law and become a criminal, which they don't want to do. So what they do is they send it to the government. The government comes in and steps in temporarily, and I use the air quotes temporarily because many times it is unfortunately permanent. But they step in temporarily to hold on to this money. And you're probably thinking, okay, well, how much of this money really is out there? Is this even really this big of a thing? 1 in 10 people in America right now are owed money. They don't even know. And you can still recover money from people that have passed away. So if you add those numbers, then it's even a higher percentage of the population. And overall, there's like $100 billion with a B dollars right now that's just sitting unclaimed that's owed to people in America that they don't even know it exists. And that's part of the problem, right? And so what I figured out several years ago was that if you just find the people that are owed money, which there's a lot of them, so they're not very hard to find, and you give them back the money that they're owed from the government, you can collect a finder's fee. And in some cases it's 10%, some cases it's 30%, or even higher sometimes. And it creates a massive opportunity because number one is there's this mass amount of money that nobody knows about. Number two is many times, you'll call someone and maybe they've heard that they're owed money or they like vaguely think, hey, you might be right. Maybe I am owed money, but they have absolutely no idea how to get it. And by the way, the reason why this is such a secret, because the government will have you think it otherwise. The government will have you think, oh yeah, you can just come get the money anytime you want to. In most jurisdictions in the United States, the government cannot keep the money directly. Okay, so they can't, if you're owed $10,000 and it never gets to you, they can't just take the $10,000 and cheat that as tax revenue. In most jurisdictions, there are some places where they can do that, which is a whole other issue, but in most places they can't. But what they can do is take any interest that money accumulates and take that as tax revenue. So an example of this is my grandma was owed $7,000 from the early 60s that she just recovered a couple of years ago. And she was owed that from an insurance payout. Well, think about that. What would $7,000 in 1963, compounded at 10% over the last, 50 years, 60 years, be worth today? A whole hell of a lot more money than $6,000, I'll tell you that. Okay. And it's unfortunate that the government is, in a lot of ways, de-incentivized from telling people about this money. So that's become kind of one of my main missions. I mean, that is the main mission of my company. We want to recover $10 billion. We've recovered a couple $100 million, which is awesome. Like that sounds like a lot of money, but when you look at the scale of $100 billion, we're really just beginning.
Yeah, so I think an example I'm kind of familiar with this. It might help some in our audience. It's essentially like unclaimed property, right? So like I think I've seen something before. Like when I moved, then some company that had some kind of maybe a check, a refund, insurance, or something like you said. They couldn't find me because I wasn't at that address or whatever. And there's some kind of check or payment that the state was basically holding. It's similar to that, but you're talking about like it could be in the case of like a house that was sold or foreclosed on, right?
Yeah. So, and you bring up a great point. So surplus funds is technically a legal term to describe one way that someone's owed money. Now, we've kind of broadened the definition because, hey, when you start a company, you can make your own definitions, right? But surplus funds, as we look at it, is an umbrella term for what we call 4 niches or 4 different ways that someone's owed money. Now, you explained one of them, which is unclaimed property. And that is where the money is being held typically at the state level, sometimes at the county level. And there's a million reasons why that money would get there. But there's 3 other ways that people are money that are not even, by the way, I'm not even counting in the $100 billion in lost money. This is just like icing on the cake. 2 of those ways have to do with foreclosures. So essentially, if you own a home and let's say that house's value is worth, it's $200,000 market value. and you owe $100,000 left on the loan that you're making payments on, right? For whatever the reason is. Maybe you bought it 10 years ago and it's appreciated. Maybe you've owned it for 20 years or 50 years and you've refinanced it, and now there's this loan on there, and you stop making the payments. Well, obviously what's going to eventually happen is that bank or that lender is going to come in and they're going to foreclose on the property. They're going to take the property back. They're going to take ownership of it, and they don't really want the property. They just want to sell it at auction to get their money back. So they sell it at auction for right around market value, $200,000, but they're only owed $100,000. So they can't make profit. It's not their right to take any of the additional money above the $100,000. But now there's this lost $100,000 that is owed back to you, to the homeowner, the guy that got foreclosed on, the gal that got foreclosed on. And the problem is that it's a huge liability for these banks and lenders to keep the money, because if they give the money out to the wrong person, now they're liable for the $100,000 that they just gave out to the wrong person. So they try to get rid of it as quickly as possible and send it to the county. But then it sits at the county forever, right? And in some cases it goes back to the state, in some cases it doesn't, whatever the case is. But the point is that, I don't know about you, but I don't think that banks, lenders, or any government entity is in the business of giving away money. In fact, none of them are. Okay. And if the government is in the business of giving away money, they're not doing a very good job of it. Okay. So it ends up just kind of floating around there. And, these are people that just lost their home. So typically they're in pretty rough financial shape. So if you can go and again find, and those are even honestly the more lucrative ones, because with the unclaimed property ones, they're a little bit simpler to do because there's less moving pieces. But many times the state will cap your finder's fee. So it'll be 10% or 15%, whatever it is. With those ones, many times there's not a cap. Now, I think you should be ethical. You shouldn't charge like 100%. That'd be really bad. Don't do that. But you can charge 20, 25% of a $100,000 fine. That's a good payday, and you're, helping someone get this money that many times they don't even know that they're owed, which is ridiculous, and they're living in their mom's basement. So, those are the three niches. And then the fourth one is through bankruptcy. So people can actually be owed money after a bankruptcy case. And again, they often don't even know. These are people that are in, again, with the bankruptcies and foreclosures, they're in tough financial positions. And it's like they need this money more than anyone else.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's no way of them really knowing that unless they made the effort to go out and find it. And so, as you said, if they're in this difficult position, for you to be able to find that for them and say like, hey, actually, you've got all this. Could be life-changing.
Absolutely. Well, and it's like, I'll tell you this. My business partner now is this gentleman by the name of David Church, and he was one of my original mentors in real estate. My career started in real estate, wholesaling. I was an agent, fix and flipping, all of this stuff.
Yeah. Can you go into more of this? I want to learn about like, how did you get started in here? Because a lot of entrepreneurs or creators, they're not going to say, oh, well, I'm going to start a business in surplus funds. It's not a typical thing you even hear about. Yeah.
Well, it's essentially like I got put into real estate really young because of a situation I was in with my ankle. So I'm somewhat tall, like 6'4", 6'5", and I love basketball. And when I was a kid, that was all I did. I played basketball 10 hours a day. I didn't do homework. I didn't do anything. It was basketball. And I was like, I'm going to the NBA. I didn't even think about college. I was like, I'm going to the NBA. I'm going all the way. And then I ended up breaking my ankle, and it wasn't like a regular break. It was like I shattered my ankle, broke it in 6 places. The bone came out of the skin. I dislocated it. It was a recovery. And I even had to get knee surgery. That's how bad I broke my ankle.
Wow.
Right? And so the recovery of that was like almost a year where I couldn't play, and it was right in the peak recruiting time. And in that time, I kind of lost my identity as well, like because my whole identity was basketball. I couldn't do that anymore. So I lost my identity, and in the realm of trying to figure out who I am and who I'm going to be as a person. I was 15 when this happened to me, a few days before I turned 16, in fact. I realized that, what I really wanted was to be successful. And one way through another, I ended up getting involved in real estate. So when I got healthy, I started attending real estate meetups, local real estate meetups in my area. And I just really found a passion for business and real estate specifically. And I started bird dogging, which is, if you're in the real estate market, you're familiar with that. It's like basically one of the most entry-level things you can do on the real estate investing side. And it, graduated up to wholesaling, which they're very similar. Got involved in some fix and flip deals, not ever as a person that was buying it, but someone literally I would go, and David Church, my business partner and again, original mentor, I would go and I would do construction when I was a kid on his fix and flips. And over the years, I just started accumulating all this knowledge of real estate strategies. I mean, I became obsessive. I would literally spend, that 10 hours a day I'd spend on basketball, I'd spend that online studying real estate, because I just was like, I need to figure this out. And I had the time to do it. So I started accumulating all this information, and fast forward a few years, I have like notebooks of notes. But I had this one notebook in particular, it was a red spiral notebook, and it was filled front to back with every investing strategy in real estate I could possibly find on the internet. And one day I'm 19 now, so this is years later, and I go to this real estate meetup, and this guy's talking about surplus funds, and he's talking about the particular kind that happened after a foreclosure. And I knew real estate, I knew foreclosures. I was like, dude, this guy's lying. Like, this is not real. You can't there's no money after a foreclosure. The bank takes it. Like, what are you talking about? And long story short, he ended up not being a liar. He ended up telling the truth, and I ended up looking like a little prideful, we'll say. I got humbled, let's just put it that way. And I realized that I still had a lot to learn and that this was a huge opportunity. I started doing it, started realizing, again, how much money there is out there. It was like the more I did it, the more I realized, like, dude, like there's even more money than I thought. And then I got to the point where at that time, to relate this into the course creating side, I was interested in online business from the standpoint of, really wanting to, basically build something that was more automated than real estate. The only way to scale real estate is through people. And I was 19 and I had really bad acne. And I was like, this is not going to work. I don't think anyone wants to listen to me. So I was like, I needed ways to scale something that was more based on technology than it was people. And I realized online business would be easier to do that. At that time, I met someone named Tanner Fox. He is not the scooter guy, the Amazon course creator guy. And he was like one of the first big Amazon influencers. Big in parentheses. I don't know. He was doing well. He was making $300,000 a month selling courses at 21 through his YouTube channel. Didn't have a webinar, didn't have a VSL, literally YouTube video, link, order form, $300,000 a month. It was like ridiculous. I was like, this is so stupid. Okay. And I looked at him and I was like, dude, well, I'm at all these real estate events. These guys are like 50 and they ain't making $300,000 a month. And then I see this guy who's 21 driving a Lamborghini and he's making $300,000 a month. I'm like, whatever he's doing, I got to do some of that. And realized what he was making money from was courses and information and how well that scales compared to services. And then I kind of just put the two together. My first course actually was a real estate investing course, and I never even launched it because I was like almost too nervous to launch it. I was like too scared. I was like, it's not going to work, da-da-da-da-da. And then I, through one way or another, realized that a huge opening in the market was surplus funds because nobody was talking about that online. I looked back at my notes. All those notes I took were from learning online, and there was nothing about that online, about surplus funds. And I was like, dude, this is a massive opportunity. So partnered with David because he had a lot more experience in it than I did. So I was like, hey, why don't you teach it? I'll focus on the online business stuff. And I'll tell you this, as a trick for some of your more beginner level audience, like I had made one course before that I never launched. I had never run any YouTube ads. I had never run any Facebook ads. I had never built a funnel. And I had no idea what the hell I was doing, like just to be blunt. I was like very low confidence. And so my plan was like, hey, I'm going to partner with David. He's going to teach us stuff. I'm going to do all the online stuff. I didn't know anything how to do online stuff. Okay, now I didn't tell him that. Okay, just to be blunt. I don't know if I would have told him if he would have worked with me, but it ended up working out for him. So I guess it's a win for him. And we launched, and it took us 6 months. We did webinars for 6 months. We didn't make any money. We did live webinars, and those sucked. And eventually we figured it out. So yeah, that's kind of the
what
long
do you
drawn out
feel
story.
helped you figure it out? Was there like a tipping point of something that suddenly it started working?
Yeah, I mean, I think in any business, it's like, first of all, at that time, you got to think about the time frame. So this was late 2017 was when we did the first live webinar. And so at that time, like Expert Secrets from Russell Brunson had just come out. And, it was like this whole thing of like, you got to do live webinars. You got to do live webinars. You got to do live webinars. That was the thing in the internet marketing education space, was live webinars at that time.
Yep.
And so I was like, all right. And I'm looking at the numbers, like I'm listening, I was obsessed. I was like, podcasts, everything I can do about live webinars, I'm learning. So I'm looking at these numbers that like Dave Woodward's talking about on his podcast, or Brunson's talking about his, or whoever it was, and they're like throwing it like, okay, cool, you get 100 people on, you close 20 of them at a K, that's 20 grand. The follow up another 20. Like I'm doing the math, and I'm like, okay, cool, that all makes sense. So let's start with this, and then we start doing that, and then we realized, dude, you can't just start doing webinars. Like, there's a lot that goes into it. Like first of all, I had never done sales before, let alone sales to a large group of people. Okay, which is way harder than one-on-one sales. And by the way, if you figure out, which we ended up figuring out how to do sales to a large group of people, then I, with no formal training later on, did one-on-one high-ticket sales, and I nuked it because it was so easy. I could literally talk to someone and figure out what they wanted. But anyways, I digress. So what ended up happening was we kept doing these live webinars, and like, again, I had so little confidence in myself. I wasn't running the ads. We hired someone to run the Facebook ads, and at first we weren't even doing that. We were like renting email lists. Right? So I wasn't managing the traffic. I was not managing the funnel at all. We hired a team to do the funnel. And by the way, looking back, they did an awful job. I should have just done it myself. I could have done a better job, right? Did an awful job. The only thing I was doing the webinar. That's it. I would spend literally 10 hours a day on the webinar. And the biggest breakthrough came from, I realized that for everything great that David does, David is not necessarily an amazing salesperson when it comes to live presentations and all that. But we were doing these webinars, we were doing them together. We were partners on the webinar. And so it's like, I would be cutting him off, and then he would cut me off, and then I would cut him off. And it was like, it just wasn't working. But again, it's like, this is someone that I look to as a mentor. So I didn't have the courage to be like, hey, David, back off. Let me do this. We said I was going to do the marketing anyways. You do the course. Let's just go with that. I literally I didn't have the courage to do that. So for 6 months, we didn't get any sales. It was awful. And I probably knew that for about 2 months of it. I was like, this ain't working. And then what ended up happening by the grace of God is I got sick. And when I got sick, we canceled the webinar. But again, I was so determined to make this work. Like, I ended up feeling a little bit better on the day of the webinar. I said, you know what, screw it. I'm going to do the webinar anyways, even if no one shows up. Now, we still had some people that had registered, but we stopped the ads and all that before.
Yep.
So I was like, whatever, I'm just going to do it anyways. No one shows up, that's fine. Well, sure enough, 3 people showed up, and I did the webinar by myself. I closed 2 of them.
Wow.
Right? And then I was like, okay, like, we're on to something. And then I had to have the hard conversation with David and say, look, dude, like, hey, this is one of my unique abilities is marketing and sales, and I was just learning that at that time. And what you're really, he was literally a teacher at one point. It's like, you're really good at teaching. Like, why don't you just teach, and I'll do this? And that's kind of been the way it's been since then, and it's been great. So I think leaning into the hard conversation was something I should have done earlier, because I think we would have made money a lot earlier. And then also, and I think this is a big one too, is like trying to figure out what your unique ability is, and then going all in on that.
Yep.
Yeah,
that's great advice. Yeah, I would challenge anyone listening to this to think about, is there something that you're doing right now in your business where it's not working? You can already see that this is a problem. And if it is difficult to figure out the solution, if that involves a difficult conversation with a partner or something like what you're talking about, how can you move forward with that today? I think in your example, you went almost backwards what a lot of people recommend of, they usually say, well, you should sell one-on-one first, and then that'll help teach you to sell one-to-many. And you went the other way. And as you said, once you mastered the webinars, selling one-to-one was easy, even with the high ticket, because you knew all the answers. But yeah, it's a lot easier sometimes to start off just trying with 1 or 2 people before you worry about that webinar. Because like you said, yeah, it can be months of time to figure that out, because you got to figure out, well, what is this person going to ask versus what is this person going to ask? And if you can kind of answer those potential objections and questions ahead of time for people, it makes it a whole lot easier. I want to address something that I feel that in your industry especially, but I think it'll help any creator or entrepreneur trying to sell something online. I feel that there's probably a good amount of people worried about, like, if you're scamming them, or if the whole thing is a scam or something like this. You even said you were skeptical when you first learned about it, right? So how do you deal with this and gain trust from your prospects?
Yeah, I think it's so funny you ask this, because like every podcast I do, they ask the same question, which is like, that's got to be the biggest thing. And to many times it is. And honestly, the biggest thing I've learned when it comes to skepticism is like lean into it. Don't like be scared of it. One of the things that I've done too, and kind of resorting back to like webinars, is if you have an offer, you have a course where there's some fundamental thing that just no matter what way you go about it, people are just not going to like. With my offer for a long time, it was that they had to make cold calls. Like people don't really want to make cold calls. Like even if you're giving away money, like you can frame it in a better way, like we do, but like people don't want to they just don't want to make cold calls, right? Like very few people are like looking forward to making 100 cold calls. And so for a long time, I like almost avoided bringing it up or like very sparingly brought it up. But then you end up with customers that are like unhappy because it's like, oh, I didn't know how to make cold calls. And it's like, well, I mean, how else did you think you're going to contact them, right? But then to their point, I never clarified. And then when I switched and I said, let me just lean into this, and just instead of leaning into it in like this hesitation way, let me just lean into it and embrace it and make it like a thing where it's like, hey, this is not a big deal, dude. You're just gonna make some calls and give away some money. It's not a big deal, right? Like our conversions went through the roof. And so it's the same thing with working with surplus fund clients where, yeah, I mean, of course, they're like, why would anybody not be skeptical if some random person calls them and says they're owed money? Like that sets every alarm, bell possible. But number one is come in prepared. So, hey, you're owed money because of this and this reason. Well, if you give them a reason, they're probably going to remember vaguely maybe where it came from. And if they don't, at least, hey, it sounds a little bit more credible. But then on top of that, lean into it. So, hey, listen, I'm sure this sounds crazy. I'm sure that, many times when you get a phone call, if you ever get a phone call from people that say you're owed money, you're probably like, what is going on? What is this, Nigerian prince scam type of thing going on here? But I want you to know I'm, registered with the state of whatever you're working in. I'm a professional. I do this. I've, the company that I'm working with, so my company, has helped recover hundreds of millions of people in America. And right now, if you look up, I can even send you an article. There's $100 billion in America that's owed to people just like you, and you're one of them. And I just want to help you recover some money and help feed my family in the process, And I think if you just lean into that, it's like, just embrace it. So, I mean, that's what I would say. One of the things too, actually, that just popped in my head, a really, really good objection handling close for people that ever do webinars or VSLs or anything high ticket is to reframe the price. Because a lot of times, like, people will drop a price on a webinar, and they'll be like, "Oh, it's $19.97," and I know it seems like a lot, but it's great, When I got to the point, I learned this from I think it was Jason Fladland, but he was like, "Luke, when I drop the price, I'm like, listen, it's a lot. That's a lot of money, and it's a lot of money. It's a large sum of money because this is a large opportunity. There you go. You just embraced it, and now you reframed the whole idea of a lot of money. Well, like, yeah, it is a lot of money. And because it's a huge opportunity. Why would it be cheap? So anyway, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think it's a great point too, that you make about embracing it. Just having nothing to hide, because like you're right. I think the example with dropping the amount of money on the webinar completely ties into that. Because if you don't address it at all, then it's scary to people, and they're like, well, wait, he's telling me it's all this money, and there's some point of tension and fear and all kinds of things. But if you just address that, like, hey, this is what I said, this is why I said that, this is why all of this is, then everyone feels a lot more comfortable. So I think that's great advice.
Absolutely.
So now you're doing this coaching, this course. Is the training more of your focus now, would you say, or are you still involved in like the surplus funds yourself?
I'm vaguely involved in surplus funds, or broadly involved in it. Me and my partner, we still actively close deals. I'm not directly involved in the actual closing of the deals, but we're still actively, like as a company, we have a side company that actually closes deals. One thing that I am more involved in, and this is kind of a lesson as well for course creators, is like, again, looking at your offer, right? Like, most offers are not, in fact, not most, all offers are going to have something that's going to hold people back and say, ooh. And if you're thinking in a very closed mind, you're like, well, I'm screwed, right? Like, what am I going to do? So for us, the two things that people did not like about surplus funds were that you got to make cold calls, and then you have to wait for the government to pay you. And it used to not be a big deal. It used to wait like 8 weeks, 12 weeks, and you get a check. But since COVID, it's just gotten longer and longer, and it's taking like 6 months now. It's crazy.
Wow.
And so obviously, like I could continue selling the program and being like, hey, you got to wait 6 months. And like, what do you think that's going to do to conversions? Like probably not help them.
Yeah.
It's probably going to make them worse. And so instead of saying that, and like, again, it's better to embrace it and maybe you can reframe it. And we've done that to extent, hey, listen, like you get in, you start building up a pipeline, and 6 months from now, you're going to have money just rolling into the mailbox every single week. Like, okay, cool. We can reframe that. But then what we did was I'm creating a company right now. It's called Surplus Advance. And so how it works is, someone might get a deal today where they're going to make $5,000, but they got to wait until, December for the check, and they don't want to wait. So I'll cut them a check today for a percentage of that money, and then I'll wait the 6 months, and I'll make profit on the back end of collecting the full money. So they get a check today, they get a T-shirt, they get a certificate, they get, all these awesome bonuses, right? We're getting pictures of them holding checks within a week or two of them signing up for the program, right? So time to value, right?
Yep.
And on top of all of that, we're making money from it. So we're increasing the getting a little advanced. We're increasing the LTV of the customer because we're collecting money on the back end, and we're decreasing the time it takes for them to be successful.
Yeah, that's
So
win-win.
and
It's awesome.
truly. So I've been spending a lot of time on that, and then also the other thing I've been spending time on too has been I think that I have a unique position where I understand webinars and marketing and sales at a really high level, and if there's an opportunity, I think I've been looking at different markets to try to jump into and partner with certain creators in those markets if I deem them being like worthy of spending a lot of resources on in terms of ad spend and trying to scale an offer there. Because I think there's some hot markets. There's always hot markets on the horizon. And I think that's one of the biggest secrets too to getting into, if you're coming in from a business perspective of trying to make as much money as possible, is getting a really good course creator like I did with David in a hot market right before it's going to blow up, and positioning yourself really well there. So that's something I've been working on as well.
Great. Yeah, that sounds good. We also saw how like you're really active on YouTube. We saw some of your videos, and you mentioned about how entrepreneurs should build systems and try to automate their processes in their business. So I like to talk about the idea that like how can you create leverage in your business, and so that way you're not trading your time for money anymore. That said, how would you say that you're achieving this in your own business apart from like webinars and things like that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, at the point I'm at now, the way I look at it is there's two types of systems. There's technology-based systems. So like you mentioned, webinars, right? Like, okay, that's a website with a video on it that automatically plays when people show up. Okay, cool. That's technology. And then there's people-based systems. And so I'm at the point now where I've experimented with both. I will tell you firsthand, technology-based systems scale easier and are typically more profitable than people-based systems. But really my main focus recently on automating and scaling has been building a really, really strong executive team. And there's this leadership model that I talk about. It's called RACI, R-A-C-I. Mm-hmm. And you're essentially trying to elevate yourself through it. So you start at R, which is responsible for. So if you're doing the sales in your company right now, that means you're responsible for sales. And then eventually you hire sales reps and you move to A, which means you're accountable to. So the sales reps are accountable to you with the sales. Okay, cool. But you're still managing and leading them and training them and all of that, right? Because they're accountable to you. Okay. Then you move from A and you hire a sales manager who fills in there, and you move to C. Well, C is like you're consulted with. So you're not responsible, you're not doing the sales anymore, you're not being accountable, you're not holding them accountable and leading them and training them. But when there's a problem that neither of those two people can figure out, or those two parties can figure out, then they come and they consult with you on the big picture, okay? And then ultimately you move to I, which is informed. And informed is, hey, when something goes wrong, you don't come talk to me, you come talk to this guy. Training and all that, you talk to this guy. Literally, I'm just sent a dashboard of numbers, and that's how we perform. And then maybe I'll make some decisions, some really, really big picture decisions. And so as you kind of go through that progression, you hire different types of people. And I'm at the point now where I'm slowly moving into the I, and that requires you to hire, a really strong exec team. So
Awesome. All right, and then Along with the YouTube stuff, we noticed that you're a big fan of YouTube ads, and you've invested heavily into those. So, can you share a little bit more about that? Do you have any tips or strategies you would share for a course creator who wants to start with YouTube ads?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, YouTube ads has been the backbone of a lot of what we've done for a while. We did Facebook ads before, and just to be blunt, like I didn't like it. I struggled. We kept getting kicked off the platform. This is in 2018 when the rules were stricter than they are now. And I don't know what it was about our offer or about our positioning, whatever. We just couldn't keep the ads on there, and Facebook was not very helpful. So we ended up moving to YouTube, and it's been great. As far as advice and all that, I would say a couple things. Anytime you're launching ads, your first time you're launching ads, the first several times you're launching ads and scaling ads as a business owner, you're going to be nervous unless you just like have no conscience or something. Like for me, I was very nervous. Like I turned on the YouTube ads for the first time and it was like $200 a day. And I looked at my bank account and I'm like, we only have this many days. And if this doesn't work, I'm screwed, right? So that's a little intimidating and scary. But the reality is like, at the bare minimum, like if everything goes south, you're probably going to know pretty early on. I would really recommend if you're not an experienced media buyer, meaning you haven't spent a lot of money on ads yourself, I would recommend that you do find someone who is an experienced media buyer and work with them. Just from the standpoint of they're going to know way quicker whether something's working or not than you are. And so even though you're going to be paying them to run your ads, as long as you're not paying them an outrageous amount for the amount of ad spend that you're spending, you're going to end up saving money because you would have turned those campaigns or those ad costs off later instead of catching them earlier. And then I think the biggest thing is just to reframe your mindset when you're spending money on ads and from spending to investing, because you're investing in getting data. And the reality is like, I just launched an offer recently, a trading offer. And, I'm at a point now where it's like, I can spend a lot more on ads and like not think about it, right? But we spent like $4,000 or $5,000 on ads and we didn't get a sale. This is a $5,000 program. So I'm like, oh crap, like that's not good. But the reality is like, I understand the market so much better now. We've made so many adjustments that when we relaunch those campaigns, like I would be very surprised if we're not a 4 or 5x on ROAS, right? So I think the biggest thing is reframing your mindset and then partnering with someone if you don't know it yourself. And, look at yourself as an entrepreneur and say, look, is my superpower, is it buying ads? Is it doing that? Like probably not. The last thing I will say, I could go on a whole long rant about YouTube ads, is with ads specifically, a lot of times, and I made the same mistake for a long time, is you'll look at the numbers of the ads and you'll be like, okay, well, our CTR is this and our cost per click is this and our CPL is this, and therefore we need to change this with the ads where we target this demographic instead of this because the CTR is better. And it's just like, at the end of the day, don't make it so robotic that you forget that people are on the other side of the computer, right? Like at the end of the day, your ads are being showed in front of people, and whether they like the ad or not, they're clicking on it and opting in or they're not. And think about what the customer's thinking versus what the numbers are saying. And that is how you will improve your ads the best that I found.
Yeah, that's great advice. All right, awesome. All right, well, I have one more question for you. On the show, we like to have each of our guests ask a question for the audience. So if you could ask our audience anything, what would that be?
Yeah, I mean, I would say is kind of going back to the hot markets thing. Like, what are you as a course creator doing to identify hot markets, and how are you? First of all, where on the internet are you? What are you doing to find these markets? And once you've found the markets, what is your strategy to again go in those markets and create a course either yourself or to partner with someone? So
Cool. All right, that's a great question. All right, well, Spencer, thanks so much for the interview. Before we get going, where can people find you online?
yeah, just you can go on my Instagram at Spencer J Vann. My name is Vann, like the shoe company, but it's 2 N's, VANN. And then same thing as my YouTube. And of course, if you want to check out Surplus Funds, just go to surplusfund.com. We've got an amazing free training. If you're a course creator and you want to see what an amazing VSL looks like, watch that VSL. You don't have to buy the product, but watch the VSL. I'm telling you right now, it's one of the best VSLs in the industry for course creators. And I know it's saying a lot, but I know a lot of the top level guys, and it is very good. So check it out, surplusfund.com. And yeah, thank you so much for your time, man.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that, Spencer.